Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and today my special guest is Katie Ford. Katie is the founder of the Katie Ford Foundation, whose focus is to eradicate slavery around the world today. Hello, Katie. Welcome.
Hi. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Great.
Katie, most people who are watching the show probably remember you as the CEO of the Ford Modeling Agency. And I think I remember you left there around 2007. And when you left, was it your idea to start this organization to focus on slavery?
You know, I actually didn't even know about slavery at that point. I was going to work with indigenous groups and come up with business models to preserve indigenous culture because that's my passion. So when I was leaving Ford, the UN asked me to participate in a conference on human trafficking. And I asked them, I said, why would you want me? I don't know anything about human trafficking. And they said, we want women who are leaders and we want different thoughts on the issue. So I went to this conference in Vienna and there were 2,000 people there. I had no idea. And after 2 hours, I knew why I was there. And when I heard about that there were 27 million slaves on earth today. Today, there's 27 million slaves. I thought, I've got to do something about it. Having worked with people before as a model agent, and people who were young and potentially vulnerable, I had many thoughts about how to protect people. And I was used to working with people from all over the world. But I had absolutely no plan at the moment when I decided I've got to do something about this.
So there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty there, but it doesn't sound like the uncertainty slowed you down or it bothered you.
There was complete uncertainty, but I didn't really almost look at it as uncertainty. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how I was going to do what I was going to do, but I was going to figure it out. I wanted to do it, and I was going to figure out how to do it. And I spent 9 months learning about the different causes, the work, the organizations that are in it, meeting government people that work in it, both here and in England. And then I came up, after 9 months, I came up with a plan of how I would start and the first thing that I would do. But on day one, I was in such shock about this. I really was in such shock that there's slavery that I think I stared at the wall all night.
And you know, it's so interesting because when people have that moment where they connect with something or they know what they want to do with their life, so often they don't, not often, but sometimes they can't follow through because they're afraid, they're worried, how am I going to do this, what's going to happen? But for you, you seem like it just struck you, it just touched your heart in such a way that you were going to do it no matter what.
I had to do it.
You had to do it.
I have to do it. And I do it, you know, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. It's really almost an obsession now because every time I hear another story of somebody being enslaved, I'm so upset. And the lack of justice and things that we take it, of course, for granted, that everybody is free to pursue something, right? But these people aren't free to pursue anything.
And there are 27 million slaves in the world today. How is that possible? That in modern day that we could have such a high number? I know you mentioned that people are duped. They don't know that they're entering into. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Most people who are victims of slavery are traveling somewhere in hope of finding a job. And they usually think they have a job. And they get duped into a situation that they weren't expecting. And it can be somebody from the Philippines traveling to the Middle East to work in a home or to work on construction sites. And when they get there, their passports are removed. They sometimes aren't paid at all. In the case of many of the maids in the Middle East, they're not allowed out of the house. And as a foreigner, you have almost no rights.
Now, and are there children involved in the slave trade as well? Are there many
There
children?
are many, many, many children.
And how did they end up in the slave trade?
So when children are trafficked, it depends where in the world you're talking about, in some places, their families are so poor they sell them. But in some places, the parents give them to an uncle or a relative who says, oh, I'm going to get them a great education, and then they sell them. And so all of a sudden their children, after a few months, if they don't hear anything, they start to wonder what's happened with their child, and they don't know where their child is. In the case of in the fishing villages, they usually believe that they're leaving the countryside and they're going to a school where they're going to get an education that's far away from their home.
A boy who's been trafficked into a fishing village, how old would a boy like that be?
Boys in the fishing villages are very removed from the towns. So all the kids there work on the fishing boats. They can be as young as 3 years old. The ones who are 3 years old are usually scooping water out of the boats as the older boys bring in the nets. They're working all the time, and they're in very dangerous situations because when the nets get caught, they have to dive down with weights on their body. They frequently die when they're doing that. They're beaten by the masters if the masters get mad, and you see several boys when you're there whose heads are just smashed in. I mean, they're slanted, and the man who is head of the group that I work with, he was enslaved. He was enslaved twice. First, it was by somebody, a friend of the family, but then he was returned to the family and his brother sold him, which is just unbelievable.
So he was sold by his family, and they knew?
He was sold by the brother.
So the brother knew?
I don't know what the parents knew. He's an older man now, and he's the one who's freeing others. So it is really unbelievable and very touching when you see him with other kids whose heads have also the same slant that he has, because he was hit by a paddle.
Are there slaves in the United States?
There are slaves in the United States, and what's very interesting is that the largest number are probably on farms and in homes, and domestic workers.
Okay. And do you think that the big companies in the United States and internationally can play a role in ending and eradicating slavery?
I think that companies can make the biggest changes to slavery of any single group, and they can do it by auditing their supply chains, first of all. And companies are reluctant to do it because when you find a problem, then you've got to acknowledge there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And since they're complicated problems, it's easier not to deal with it. But the fact is that within almost everything we buy, there could potentially be slave labor. And we could go down, like the cotton, on cotton farms around the world, there is definitely child labor, and American companies refuse to buy from those countries.
And what about the sex trade? I mean, it seems like it might be a little more difficult because it's not about big companies. Do you do work in that area, and what do you see for the future of that?
Well, sex is very different than labor. In my mind, I sort of separate the two on the solutions. Mm-hmm. So the solutions for sex trafficking have a lot to do with laws, enforcement of laws, of cultural beliefs of having sex with children and what should be permissible. And then there's always money involved. So how do you stop the money flows from happening also, which many companies here are working on right now.
And so your organization, you partner with other organizations around the world?
That's right. I partner with organizations that work on the ground, that work within the culture, and they are people from that culture.
And what can we do as individuals to help this issue? We're here, and most of the slavery is far away. So if we want to get involved, what can we do? Okay,
so one, you can write the companies to find out how far down their supply chain they are checking or having independent auditing. And you can ask any company you buy a product from, what are they doing? Because independent social auditing is the most important thing that a company can do. And it means that that includes their suppliers. You can donate money. In my foundation, we give 100% to these on-the-ground groups that work to fight slavery. And, you know, in the beginning, I wasn't going to do that. I was really just going to talk to companies. And then I realized this is so underfunded. People can learn the signs. And it's important even here to learn the signs, because the only way these people get help is being somebody asking them, do you need help? Are you okay? You know, if there are maids next door lying on the floor and they don't have a bedroom, or they're never allowed to leave the house, those are signs that something's wrong.
Okay. So what do you see the future for this issue? Do you think it's possible? I mean, 27 million people. Do you think it's possible to eradicate slavery in the world today?
I think that it is possible to eradicate slavery. And I don't know if it's going to be when I'm alive or in my children's lifetime, but it is definitely possible to change things.
So there's hope, there's maybe.
There's a lot of hope, and I'm thinking definitely maybe.
Definitely maybe. Thank you very much. This is Allison Carmen, and until next time, be well. Thank you.